The Unplugged series was designed partly for this function of bringing together people from a diverse set of backgrounds to learn more about and engage more in entrepreneurship. And we thank you all for being part of that. I'd like to just take a second to talk about upcoming events. Brad, you have a couple?
Yeah, in particular, March 22nd is the Silicon Flatirons Annual Entrepreneurship Conference. This year we're going to be taking a deep dive into angel investing. Jeff Clavier, super angel nationally known, is going to be one of our keynote speakers. Also Jeff Sohn, who is the executive director of the Center for Venture Research at the University of New Hampshire, which has been doing some interesting research around angel investing for some time now, will also be part of the lineup, Jason Mendelson among others. So that is March 22nd at the law school in the afternoon.
Tonight's guest is Jim Franklin. Jim's the CEO of SendGrid, a Foundry-backed infrastructure applications company. SendGrid replaces in-house email infrastructure to help companies avoid the headache of having to build, scale, and maintain these systems. Its clients include Foursquare, EMI, and Spotify. Before SendGrid, Jim was the CEO, CFO, and VP of Sales at Decisioneering, which was acquired by Hyperion. He was also VP and GM of Hyperion, which was acquired by Oracle. He was VP of Enterprise Performance Management and the General Manager of the Crystal Ball Global Business Unit of Oracle.
What's going to be fun is when SendGrid acquires Oracle.
So we'll learn more about each of those steps along the way. But first, given that we have students in the audience, I like to start with that phase of your life, the sort of high school, college time period. And what did you study? And did you know that you were going to be an entrepreneur?
Well, the high school phase, I loved school, loved all parts of school, but somehow I got in my head that I liked business. I grew up in Pennsylvania, went to the College of William & Mary Liberal Arts School. They had one of the top accounting programs in the country. And so being generally attracted to hard things, I thought, that sounds fun, so I'll go study accounting. But with no real intention of being an accountant. I just wanted to be sort of a business person. And so I graduated with an accounting degree, passed the CPA exam, but what do you do, right? So I went off to law school. So I figured if accounting teaches you how to add and subtract, I go to law school to learn how to read and write to be that well-rounded person I thought that I would become at William & Mary. I got to law school for one semester, and during the finals of my contracts, I walked out of the finals exam. I was so frustrated with law students in general that I thought, the only thing I like about contracts is calculating damages. So I decided to cross-apply back to the MBA program. And then, of course, in the general theme of you should finish what you start, I did the JD MBA. So I did finish law school and took lots of great courses like criminal law and constitutional law and things, but did a lot of tax and business stuff, and then did the MBA. It was in the MBA program where I learned about venture capital and software and where technology intersects. So that's where I sort of thought, okay, this is something that sounds like it would be fun to do. I also got into triathlons at that point in my life, and so being in Virginia in 1991, 92, not many people were doing triathlons. There's probably 3 of us training full-time. And, I was really busy in law school, but other than studying all the time, I was training. And so that's when I decided to move west and come to Boulder, because there was venture capital here and triathlons right here in sort of West Pearl. And that was 92. So this is my 20th year of being based in sort of the West Pearl area.
All right, so you get out to Colorado. You don't know anybody, I assume?
Almost. So, even back then it was hard to find a job, out of law school, etc. It was very hard to be in Virginia and try and find a job in Colorado. I tried with some firms that were like national, like interviewing in the DC office or something, and they're like, no, if you want a job there, you got to go there. So I had a 73 Land Cruiser and packed it up with my triathlon bike, interview suit, and this is all sort of pre-web days, right? So I had to kind of do the job search by hand. And so kind of moved out here more or less sight unseen in the summer of '92.
Thinking that you were looking for law firm jobs?
Oh no. So I thought I could get a job in the venture capital industry, which back then had partners and people who opened the mail. There was no real concept of an associate. So there was Hill, Carmen, Kirby, and Washington were at 9th and Arapahoe. And so I just came like, hey, I'm here. course, they didn't know I was coming, right? And they were like, hey, nice guy, get out of here, right? And so it took a long time to find a job. And so I'm 26. My peers from the accounting program had been off in industry for 4 years, making good salaries, buying cars, being in apartments, getting married. And I was kind of a flaky guy who went to law school and business school and moved to Colorado. And then I get here and it's like, no one knew what to do with me. Because I was 26, I never really had a proper job. I taught tennis actually in the summers. And you know, I had too much education, no experience. So it's a little bit quirky. But the one guy I did know was at Cooper's and Library, Jeff Rudolph. And it was an introduction from one of the Cooper's offices in Richmond, I think. And when I met him, he said, you need to go to Rocky's Venture Club. And so this was in probably July. And so then I went there in September of '92. And I showed up looking kind of like, Corey, raise your hand. So I looked kind of like that. and just, you know, out of law school, I had all this time, I was fresh and eager. And they're like, we're going to put you to work. And so I was on the membership committee, so I'd call people. I was on the sponsorship committee, calling people for money. I would fill panels by calling, you know, the local VCs, which is something I wanted to do. And what I remember from that first time is that every time you called someone, maybe not the sponsors, they're a little trickier, but you know, to speak on panels, everyone always said yes. You know, from '92 forward, there's this very consistent theme that people want you to be successful, and they want to help. And so for 2 years, you know, I did that, you know, 10 to 20 hours a week. You know, I wasn't busy, right? No kids and family and all that stuff. So I was just talking to you this week about doing that, right? Just really do a lot of different things. I ended up having to get a day job. I started temping at Robert Half. Right? I was doing how fast I could do a 10 key. I don't know what a 10 key was. I'm like, I'm a CPA. I don't know how to run a 10 key. And it's pretty good Excel though. But I did some, you know, just temporary work for Pace Membership Workhouse and Bentonite Corporation down in Denver. And so it was just enough to kind of barely pay the bills along the way. And
what did you get out of the interaction with the RVC and other committee organizations? And it sounds like that set a precedent that really continues to this day. So the announcements were a good example. Founders Institute, Techstars, Silicon Flatirons, On Campus, Startup Colorado. I mean, you are involved in addition to your day job and family work.
Yeah, all that stuff. So the Angel Capital Summit was sort of put on by Rocky's Venture Club. So, you know, 20 years later, that team still goes through. One of the things I did was I was part of the Government Affairs Committee. And this consisted of Eric Weissman and I drinking beer and Lodo and complaining about the government. And you know, some things don't change. Eric's now running for Congress here in Boulder. So he's even being part of the government. But it was 2 years after sort of this, you know, having a day job. It was a little sketchy, but doing all the fun stuff at night, all the volunteer work. Eric said, "Hey, why don't you join my business as CFO?" So that was my first sort of big break. But it took 2 years of sort of giving without an expectation of return, just because I thought it was fun to hang around interesting, smart people doing, you know, cool things. And I knew Eric worked at the 1380 Lawrence down in Denver, so it's like a real office building with, you know, offices. And you know, I thought, like, my dad wore a three-piece suit to work all the time. I was like, so Eric always wears like paisley shorts and loafers and, you know, pink button-downs that aren't tucked in, and it's kind of goofy. And I was just like, what's this all about? And they had cartoons on their doors and stuff. I'm like, this is not my dad's office. But the first day I showed up to work, I wore a suit, and he thought that was hilarious. He's like, you gotta lose the suit. So fast forward to SendGrid, we wear hoodies right all the time. I wore a hoodie to a board meeting last month. It was like, you've changed. So it's been a long arc. But yeah, that was sort of my first opportunity to sort of restart the decisioneering crystal ball business in the summer of '94.
Let's talk about that business. So crystal ball, maybe you can baseline up. What was the original idea that you're getting involved with in 1994?
Eric Weissman is a super smart guy, and way back in 1988, when Excel was on the Mac, he got the vision that Microsoft Excel is cool, but it's not cool enough because it does math with numbers. And he understands the world more finely in that when you think about future numbers, like what your sales might be in a future period, it's really it's an uncertain number, and so it's a probability curve. And so he figured out a way to do math in Excel with probability curves, which became a really big idea. And it took a long time to do that. But that was, Monte Carlo simulation in Excel was the core product. And I see a few crystal ball through here, which is great. And that is it's a long story, but that was the core idea in '94. So he raised a little bit of money from Roser Ventures, and it crashed the business. So he laid off himself in June of '94, and then it was that fall, he was restarting the business. Because a funny thing happens, if you've got some revenue and your expenses are too high, if you fire everybody, the revenue doesn't go to zero. In this case, it was about $60K a month to show up in checks to a post office box in Boulder. And so he's like, well, we need someone to receive the checks and deposit them. And the problem was there was about, several $100,000 worth of debt. And so we had a small fire hose and a big fire that started to put out the fire. And eventually the hose got bigger and the fire got smaller.
And so you step in when the hose is small and the fire is big, and what was that decision like? How did you decide, yep, this is the right call?
Anyone know where the cruise room is? Down in Lodo, the Oxford Hotel. Anyone been to the men's room in the cruise room?
Where's this going?
Well, there's martinis involved. It was very late, and Eric's like, hey, you want to work for me? And I thought, that sounds fun, better than the job I've got. And he's like, I don't know if it'll last more than 30 days or 90 days. But I was like, what the heck? And so actually I was outside counsel, so here's the law degree was helpful. So there were so many creditors and stuff suing him that it was just a nightmare. Someone had to do all that litigation. And so I basically set up a law practice in Boulder at 1526 Spruce Street, right behind the Mountain Sun Brewery, which turns out to be a handy thing. Grab your drink, you right at the top, and go fill it up, and go right back. And so for a year, we kind of did a contract relationship where I got paid every week and kind of managed all the money and the litigation, and would go to Denver, and we'd make our vendors sort of earn their money 3 times. Once when they did the product or service, once when they went through all the litigation and sued us properly, which is not easy to do if you paid attention to your civil procedure, which I did. And then the 3rd time, because after you get a judgment, it's not easy to collect the cash. So we became experts at managing cash in the nth degree, to say the least.
You learn a lot in Entrepreneurs Unplugged, drinking.
Hang out in the cruise room, you might get picked up as a CFO.